Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Jesse. I am the office manager and current interim program coordinator for the Multicultural Center. And before we begin tonight's festivities with the Middle East Ensemble, we're going to present the land acknowledgement. And please give it up for our program coordinators, Mickey, Emily, and Riley, who will present the land acknowledgement.
We ask you to join us in acknowledging the Chumash peoples, their elders, both past and present, as well as their future generations. We would like to take this opportunity for us all to reflect on how the work we do here today, in our search for knowledge, our opportunities to teach, and every day in our chosen fields, affects these lands and the peoples of these lands that we work with and research to protect. We acknowledge that this university system was founded upon exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples, including those on whose lands this institution is located, the villages and unceded lands of the Chumash people. This UCSB administration has failed to faithfully and dutifully support the traditional custodians of these lands, Chumash people, and indigenous students, through their continued support of Mauna Kea. As we work together to prevent further damage to these lands and waters that support not only our livelihoods, recreation, lifestyles, research, and education, we remember that the Chumash peoples of this area have been separated from these lands, unable to maintain livelihoods as they should, unable to recreate traditionally, unable to maintain their traditional lifeways freely, and unable to have the same access to their lands that we are provided, to do their own traditional research and educate their future generations.
The Chumash people are comprised of the descendants of indigenous peoples removed from their island of origin, Limu, Anyapak, Witma, and Tucan, subjugated by 5 missions during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, from Malibu to Morro Bay and inland to Bakersfield. The villages upon which this university sits were a safe haven for maritime travelers, a place alive with trading, hospitality, and abundance, a place where knowledge of and from the surrounding areas far and wide was shared with all people of this place and its many visitors. A traditional place of sharing knowledge and education, a tradition this university has an obligation to remember. Many of the projects and research conducted by this university are within the traditional territory of the Chumash peoples and/or affect other indigenous peoples in their territories. And in spite of all of this, each tribe, council, clan, and band are working diligently to restore and continue their traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from this historical trauma. The damage that has been done and continues to be done by not sharing the true history and legacy in this place and others, and by the exploitation of the natural cultural resources of these areas, can never be erased. There is no mitigation or research project that can make their communities whole again. But we can do better.
As educators, friends, and allies together, we can acknowledge the mistakes and atrocities of the past and move forward in remembrance and relationship with the local Chumash peoples and other indigenous peoples to facilitate their process of healing by making sure that our processes here make room for their Chumash and indigenous voices to be heard, their traditional ecological knowledge of these territories to be listened to, and their peoples to be part of the healing of these lands and waters, as well as themselves. This acknowledgement, though brief and in no way complete, demonstrates a commitment by this institution and their educators to begin the process of creating a relationship with the local Chumash and indigenous communities and work to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. We come together today to acknowledge, stand up for, and give voice to the unceded lands and waters of the Chumash and all their peoples. Thank you so much for taking this time to acknowledge the land that we're on today.
And with that, Scott, did you want to take the lead now?
Yeah, great.
Perfect. Please enjoy your evening. And for those of you who did register for the reception after, we'll be having Zaytun later tonight. All right? Thank you and enjoy.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is just so thrilling for us. It's been a focal point of our activities for a good while now. So I really thank you all for helping to make it happen. I'd like to thank Jesse, who is just up here. Can we all get a round of applause for Jesse? Jesse was so gracious in this project. When I approached him, it was in September, way before we started, and he just said very quick. It took him about 10 seconds to say yes, and let's do it. And I want to thank Sean for all of his work to help making this happen. Sean, thank you very much. Sean is also with the MultiCultural Center. And I want to thank all my fellow faculty in the music department. Thank you very much for all your years together, friendship and support. I want to thank all the faculty of CMES. We thank you so much for taking the time to come out. This is the Center for Middle East Studies. The center co-sponsored the event, and I want to thank Shireen Saikali for jumping to a quick yes at that suggestion. I want to thank Juan Campo. Juan is going to be, Juan's a professor in religious studies, and he's going to be working the things behind us here. So what I'd like to do here, in addition to thanking a few more people, is just setting up the song we're about to sing, so that you sort of so that it's not something that you're distant from, and you have no understanding of what's happening moment to moment. Rather, I want to make it that you are pretty clear what's happening and what the larger structure is, so that you can, comfortably not only enjoy what's happening, but sort of know where we are and where we're headed, this type of thing. Okay? So, but maybe before I should do this, let me just introduce Sue Rudnicki. Sue Rudnicki. This is surprisingly, this is the 33rd year of the Middle East Ensemble. So we've been in the music department for 33 years, and Sue has led the percussion section for all 33 years. Sue Rudnicki. And Sue is a lecturer in the music department. She teaches Middle Eastern percussion on Monday nights at 7 p.m. So it's a registered class if you're ever interested in taking it. This is it's under Music 22 and Music 122, so and 222 for grads. And then I'd like to acknowledge Professor Magda Campo as our Arabic language professor. So we are intensely concerned with being majorly aware with the words we are singing and the cultural aspects of them. And so Magda very thoroughly works us. We learn a phrase one of the things I want to do, the song Arabic music and the song we're going to play has a recurring refrain. And the thing about the recurring refrain is you have to recognize that it's a refrain. Right? There are people way outside the door. Maybe could you guys come in? Is there any way we can have you come on in? I wonder, can we let people sit in the aisle here, or is that not possible? So one of the things I want to do is to show you what the refrain is, and we're going to do that in a second. And I'll ask Professor Magda Campo to help me with this. So, but let's start. So this is a song. So this is a song called Aghadan Alqāk. So meaning, will I see you tomorrow? Will we meet tomorrow? And it's by the Egyptian singer Umm Kulthum. So Umm Kulthum was, without a doubt, there's no question, the most famous Arab singer of the 20th century. There's absolutely no question whatsoever. We can talk about who's number 2 and who's number 3 and get into disagreements when you go down to 3, 4, 5. But the number 1, it's absolutely the case. And it's partly because she started her career in the Delta region, the northern region of Egypt, as a teenager, in the teens. And in the 20s, she was already being told by the performers who would tour from Cairo. They came to meet her and her father. She would perform with her father and her brother and her cousin. And so the father would find all the famous performers who were performing from Cairo and actually invite them to the home, and a humble home. And these singers, these famous people would say, oh, wait a second here, you know, you are not for village life, you're for the big city. Your voice is, you have to move to Cairo because, you know, the Arab world wants you and the world wants you. You're not supposed to be staying in the village. And it took until, I think, 1922 she arrived. By 24, she already had record contracts, and she put out a couple of dozen records in 1924, 25. By 26, she was being declared by the Cairo press the most important singer of the Arab world. It took really that long. There were still 2 or 3 who were in that fight for who was the best. By 28 and 29, it was firmly established. Well, she kept performing in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, and she performed all the way till 1972. Till 1973, January 73. So it just kept going, you know, like every media. So the first media was radio, and then there were these discs, and then there were talkies. So she performed in very early films, right soon after they created sound for films. And when they created TV in the Arab world, it wasn't really until the 60s, and she was famous for TV. She created this concert series, or it was created for her, the first Thursday of every month. So you might know in the Arab world, in the Muslim world, it's Thursday night is the big night of the week, as our Friday night is. And so she would do a concert the first Thursday of every month. And the way it's said is the Arab world would shut down, and people would sit in front of, go to a cafe perhaps where there was a television, or in front of radios, and just communally, collectively, the world stopped. And people have said this to me, people who lived in Morocco, which is really culturally very far away from Egypt, let alone in terms of mileage. And people say this in Syria, Lebanon, Israelis say this. So it's just throughout the entire region. And so this is Kulthum. And the most famous composer of the same Arab world was Muhammad Abd al-Wahhab. And they were not working together, and they were not working together. And finally, in 1964, they did their first song together. And this was such a major thing that the most famous composer was working with the most famous performer, that once they realized it was happening and they were preparing the song, there were daily newspaper articles about the aspects of their preparing. So for about 6 months before they finally performed the song in February 6, 1964, there were daily newspaper articles. So by the time they performed, it was just like the biggest thing. It was and so people say that is the most famous song, Arab song of the 20th century. Their song together in 1964. So this is 8 songs later, and this is I believe the 9th song that he composed for her. And then it is sending a poem by Hadi Adam. And you see here, I'm in the way for some of you, but it's they premiered it in 1971, which when I realized that was happening, I just got excited because obviously this is the 50th year anniversary, right? So that's what, we actually did this before, at the 50th anniversary of the 64 concert. So I don't know if any of you who are here now were there then, but we did it on February 6th, 2014, which was the 50th year anniversary to the date of that concert. So it's the 50th anniversary is sort of helping us out a little, in a sense. So here she is. She always carried the cloth with her, the scarf. She always had her hair up in the bun. She's elegant. So this is an older picture. This is a picture from about the time that she sang the song. And another example. And on the right is Muhammad Abd al-Wahhab. This is a very early picture. So this is decades before 1971. We actually know that they would meet each other often. They were invited to the same parties, even in the 20s, let alone the 30s and 40s, in people's houses. And people would just take turns singing, so they would like sing separately in parties for decades, but they wouldn't work together, and then finally that happened in '64, as I mentioned. And here's a picture of the two of them, older, about the time when this song happened. He's handing her, we don't know what. We've guessed, but we don't know. So she sang the song 5 times. The first one in Cairo, and then 4 more in Cairo, in Abu Dhabi, she went to in Cairo. And this Kulthum is incredibly studied these days, so we have all the recordings. And so we know that the first one lasted 111 minutes, this very song. And the next one, she did it quicker, in a little bit more than an hour and a half. And then she did it in a little bit more than an hour, like this, and we see, okay? And she died in '75, and her last concert was in January of '73. So she sang this in '72, so it was interesting to me that just a few months before her death, this was one of the songs she was singing. And our 71 means it was just within the last 2 years of her career, right? She stopped performing in January '73. And these are the 10 songs, and these are, except for 2 of them, these are all very, very, very well-known songs, extremely well-known songs. People would just start singing them if you mentioned the name of any one of them, except for the 2. So this is the 1971, I don't know if you can see the red font, but it's a genre called Qasida, which I'll mention in a second. Okay, here it is. So Qasida, interestingly, the genre is a poetic genre, and the thing about Qasida is that it's in classical or modern standard Arabic. It's not in the Arabic that people just speak to each other on the streets. It's not. It's a literary Arabic, and it's a historic Arabic. And let's see what I have next here. It's a major component of Arab culture's deep historical heritage, means that people have been, the Qasida genre dates back before the Prophet Muhammad. So it's even 2,000 years ago, it's safe to say, the genre was part of Arab heritage. So for Kulthum to be singing Qasidas is really quite significant. She also sang, the majority of her songs were in the normal dialect of Egypt, the Egyptian dialect. But this one is in the genre, is in the classical or modern standard Arabic, and it's called Fusha, as all Qasidas are in Fusha. So, for example, the title Aghadan Alqāk means, will I see you tomorrow, will we meet tomorrow? If you were just trying to be a normal Egyptian, you might say Ashufak Bukra, Ashufak Bukra. You would never on the street say Aghadan Alqāk. It just doesn't happen. It's a classical language, a modern standard language. And that has repercussions in many ways. So people receive the song with, I think, a little bit of cultural awe, that it's a high thing. It's trying to be of a high voice. It also means that if you were to ask, some of the lines can be actually difficult for the normal Egyptian to understand. So if I picked a difficult line and asked normal Egyptians, they might go, I don't know, let me ask my uncle, he might know this type of thing. So it really, there are ramifications of it being in Fusha, both in the way the song is viewed and the way it's received. Yeah. But that being said, she sang 60 Qasidas. And when in her first batch of recordings in 1924, there were 3. And in the very last year of her life, in '72, she sang 2. So she sang Qasidas throughout her career, 60, which is really quite an amazing number, a remarkable number. Okay? And the poet, I'm sorry, his first name is al-Hadi Adam. And I apologize for the font that got messed up there. And so this is al-Hadi Adam. He was from Sudan. And he very commonly would, when he was in events, when he was on TV, when he was in public, he often wore this clothes, but he also wore Western dress, okay? And we actually have a picture of him. There's something wrong right below his turban. The white of the turban is mistakenly double superimposed. But this is at the time when he gave her the poem. This is, so this is Kulthum, and this is Aghadan. So people say about him, he was considered by critics to be one of the greatest poets, not only of Sudan, but also of the Arab world. He was a prolific writer and has several collections of poems. And Kulthum selected his poem among tens that were offered to her during her visit to Sudan in '68. So what happened is, you know, Israel, when Israel won the war in 1967 and the Arab world lost it so decisively, Kulthum started doing concerts around the Arab world in a sense to build things up again, and even to help in a future war effort. So she went from country to country, and when she went to Sudan, and we know the exact date, in December 30th, 1968, but whenever she went to a new country, they did all these cultural things. Women would come and literally dress her in their traditional garb, and dance troupes might dance for her. They gave her gifts that were traditional to their culture. So in Sudan, all these poets all came forward, and this was one of the poems that she was given. Okay, the poem that was Aghadan Alqāk, this one that we're singing. So it's her only poem by someone from Sudan. And we could give you throughout translations, and the translation we're using is by Muhammad Abd. And this is, he actually tags this on a YouTube video of her performing. So I continually stopped the video and wrote down what he had translated, moved it forward, and what he translated. Many people have translated it, but many of us, Magda and Juan and others, have said this is maybe the best of the translations. So this is what you're going to see throughout this program. You're going to see a translation by Muhammad Abd, because we want you to understand the words as we're singing, right? So it's interesting that, you know, Kulthum has a large orchestra, much larger than we are here, and they would rehearse first with the composer, and the composer would sit on with an oud, so these are ouds here, and sitting with the oud, he would teach the musicians. He wouldn't give them written music, he would play with his oud and sing and teach. So when Muhammad Abd, this famous composer, when he was the composer, the number of rehearsals increased dramatically, reaching over 50 for this song. So they had 50 rehearsals. And this is reported by one of ethnomusicology's most famous Kulthum scholar. In fact, I think more correctly, ethnomusicology's most famous Kulthum scholar, Virginia Danielson. So we did not have 50 rehearsals. I think we maybe had about 18 or 19 or something like this. So this is really a major part of what I want to do. I want to teach you, or show you what you're about to hear, so that when you're in the middle of it, you know where we are. So I hope you can see the red here. Basically, it starts with a vocal piece, that's a vocal, and that's the refrain. It will come back. And then there's the first verse, and that first verse is followed by the refrain. And then there's a second verse, and the second verse is followed by the refrain. But here's the thing that might surprise you. Although you've come to hear a song, Muhammad Abd and the composers of this time in the 50s, but more so in the 60s, and even more so here in the early 70s, created instrumental sections that continually grew. So the instrumental sections, when Kulthum started in the 20s and 30s, was often like a minute long. There would be a minute instrumental introduction to the song. And then they became, well, let's do 2 minutes, so let's do 3 minutes, so let's do 4 minutes. So this is an example of the song that has grown so much that the instrumental introductions to each of these 3 sections is absolutely profound. So we're going to see that we're going to find that the piece is going to start not with the refrain itself, but with an instrumental introduction, and then we'll hear the refrain. Then we hear the new instrumental introduction to this first verse, so completely new. And then we hear the refrain. And then we hear another introduction, the introduction to the second verse, and then we hear a refrain, okay? So this is what you're going to hear. And when we have the refrain, we're going to have the word refrain there. And when we have instrumental introduction to the first verse, we're going to actually have it there on the screen, so you know where we are, okay? I'm really intensely interested in you knowing where we are in the larger project. So otherwise you're sitting there and going, I have a sense if it's music you don't know, I have a sense you're sitting there going, why are they still playing? Where are we in this piece? You know, it has no meaning because you're still playing. Why? But if you have a sense of the structure, you have a sense of the expectation. And then we want you to understand the refrain. So when the refrain happens in the beginning, and when it happens after the first verse, after the second verse, we want you to recognize it. Okay, so this is a project right now for me. Let me talk about the instrumental introduction. So the first introduction, because of al-Wahhab and his love for different instruments, starts off with a qanun solo. And Jim Grippo here, could you all applaud Jim Grippo? That is a qanun. So within like 15 seconds into the introduction, you're going to hear a qanun solo, okay? And then soon after, I think the next is an accordion. And Michelle, please welcome Michelle. Michelle is going to have a rather brief. It's quick, and these are not extended. An accordion solo, and then we have an instrument that's featured throughout the song, electric guitar. So this is Eric. So can we all practice this word? Guitar. Guitar, okay? This is a guitar, okay? And then we have a violin solo, and Solmaz will give us very, very beautiful. And then we'll hear the vocal, and then we hear this other instrumental introduction to the first verse, and that also has solos. So guitar, accordion, this time with nai and violin. And then we have the first verse and the refrain. And then we have, this one has violin, guitar, and we have oud solo here, and this is by Hani. A number of these solos are extremely short. Extremely short. It's just a moment, like 3 seconds. Let's do it again. So now we're up to 6 seconds. But it's a whole different feel. It just changes the mood. Okay, it's a different color. So again, this line that you've come here for a song, but you're about to hear a tremendous amount of instrumental music. And Muhammad Abd is prized for this, and he's prized for the diversity of things he puts into his instrumental parts. Okay. So this is not rare for him, this is normal for him, okay? And then there's the issue of repetition. So why is it that Kulthum could sing the song in 111 minutes one time and 96 minutes the next time? It's that the number of repetitions of every single section is decided at the time of the performance. And if it's going well and people like what they're hearing and the audience starts cheering, the performers will repeat that section. And if they like it, and then if they start just cheering more, the Kulthum will look and go, okay, let's do it again. And so generally, she would, in her regular concerts, perform each of these sections 3 times. So she would perform the instrumental introduction and the vocal refrain, and then she would go back to the instrumental introduction, but if you see where I put, this is a Western repeat sign in Western music. They don't do it at the front of the instrumental introduction, they go towards the end of the instrumental introduction. So this is what we are going to do. We're just going to repeat it once. And having done the instrumental introduction and the refrain, we're going to go back to the end of the instrumental introduction and do the refrain again. And by doing it twice, we're doing it, to do it only once is like, you know, why? You know, we're here to hear this music. Why are you running through it so quickly? To hear it a second time, it's just more meaningful. To hear it a third time, you know you're getting a good concert. If you heard it a fourth time, you go home and go, oh damn, well, she was good tonight, you know, because she was creating all this energy. And because of that, she would repeat more often. And then we're going to do the second introduction and the first verse the same way. We're going to go back to the end of the introduction. And in the second verse, we're not going to repeat the introduction at all, but we're going to repeat the first half of the verse and the second half of the verse. So let me just say, this is not our choices. We are covering Kulthum, right? So this is ways that she has done this. But I want to be clear, because she could do it much more, and I just want to be clear just to remind us that she did this in 2 hours. We're planning basically a 42-minute piece here. And you know exactly the parts, right? So I hope you realize what I'm trying to give you here. So we're doing it, why are we doing it in 40 minutes and 42, and she's doing it in 111, because she just kept repeating. And she would repeat because the audience would demand it. They would just, if you hear her recordings, it's so joyous. The audience is just cheering, cheering, and cheering. And then they cheer louder and louder, and finally she just cannot go on. They've stopped her. They have demanded it, and she turns, and then they cheer more because they succeeded. It's just joyous to see. It just makes her concerts parties that the audience is actively involved with creating, right? And let me just say this, a silent audience is a dead audience, okay? So, but then why did she do it less later? You know, we could try to figure out what was happening in the hall at that time. Okay, so here's the refrain. So this is that we want you to recognize when it occurs. And it's going to occur 4 times. Why? Because we're repeating it the first time. And then the first verse and the second verse ends in this refrain. So you're going to hear this 4 times, okay? So, Stephen, you want to come up here? So Stephen is our singer. Could welcome Stephen, please. So, we want to show you what this is going to sound like here. So we are not starting the song. We're just showing you what the refrain is, okay? You ready, everybody? That was the first line twice. Okay, I should do this now. Stephen Thompson. Stephen Thompson. So we're gonna show you a little bit of what we do. We're gonna ask Professor Magda Kamper to just give us that very line here. So Magda, please.
So the very first line, sorry, thank you. Of course, in Arabic we read in reverse of English, so we read from right to left. So the very first word on the right-hand side of the first verse says, هكذا. هكذا. Repeat. هكذا. Okay. We write it with the sound, but in the colloquial we pronounce it z. So هكذا. أحتمل العمر نعيما وعذابا. هكذا احتمل عمر نعيما وعذابا. هكذا.
هكذا احتمل العمر نعيما وعذابا. هكذا احتمل العمر نعيما وعذابا.
Okay, so could you sing this with us here? I just want to make sure that when you hear it, that you are just fully like, oh, that's it. No question about it. Okay, here we go. You ready? We're trying to sing. We're doing this one line twice. Here we go. You ready? And middle line, but it ends with the words, with the title song, the title, Aghadan Alqāk. So here's how it ends. Okay, this will be the end of the first refrain, this will be the end of the second refrain, the third refrain, and this will be the end of the song. Okay, here's the end, ready, and...
Aghadan, Aghadan Alqāk, Aghadan Alqāk.
So, Aghadan Alqāk, Aghadan Alqāk. Aghadan, like so, and then Aghadan Alqāk, and then Aghadan Alqāk. Again, please, ready? And...
Aghadan, Aghadan Alqāk, Aghadan Alqāk.
So I know that to you might like, you know, one thing that's surprising is that the ways that songs end is different in every culture. And in every culture, it's clearly an ending moment. So for all those of us who grew up in the West, we know an orchestral piece that's coming to an end. We know this build-up, or we know maybe a 5/1 chord. We know ways that end. So when a piece ends in the West, we know it's over. We're very, very clear about this. You folks who have never dealt with Arab music, you might go, is that an ending? Well, it turns out that has the cues and the clues. That is a clear ending for anyone who grew up with Arab music, and specifically, it has to do with that you go up the octave, you go down the octave, and then he goes up again. That traveling up and traveling down and then ending up is a clear, there's no question that this is the end of a song. This isn't like, okay, you know, was that it? Which has to be the way you're feeling, you know, just you didn't grow up with it. But if you had grown up with it, this is clearly an end. And Arab audiences, actually, they start clapping like 2/3 of the way through because they already realize it's the end. They've gotten the clues. It's interesting how clear and how cultural it is, okay? So we want you to just hear it a bunch of times more so that you can hear the end. And hear how it goes down, how it goes, ready, please, and.
Aghadan, at the end?
Just the end.
Okay.
Just the end. Ready, and.
Aghadan, Aghadan Alqāk, Aghadan Alqāk.
Again, please, and.
Aghadan, Aghadan Alqāk, Aghadan
Okay, so here's the refrain. Last time when we're about to start this concert. Here we go. Ready? This is the refrain. Ready? And.
هكذا أحتمل العمر نعيما وعذابا هكذا أحتمل العمر نعيما
Allah.
وعذابا بركة هر وقابا مسح الشوق فذهبا
Okay, so this is our refrain. This is Umm Kulthum song with al-Wahhab, right? And the poet is Sudanese. The 50th year anniversary, and this is what you're about to hear. You're about to hear an instrumental introduction and a vocal refrain, and then we're going to repeat that just from the end of the instrumental introduction, and then you'll hear that refrain. So that's twice. And then we're going to hear a brand new instrumental section with all these amazing solos. The mode changes, the maqam changes. So that's a whole other issue. But actually the scales change. And then the first verse, and that will end with the refrain. And we're going to repeat a little bit of that before it ends. So we're just doing the refrain once. And then we're going to, we have the refrain, so we have to stop. And hopefully you'll feel like you want to applaud. And Umm Kulthum hangs out a second, and she might step back, and then she'll step forward, ready to start. And we start the instrumental introduction for the third section, the second verse. We're going to play the first half and repeat it as she does. and repeat the second half as she does, and then refrain, that's it, we're out, okay? And so that, seriously, if this were traditional, you would have the chance to go crazy at any moment in this and demand that we repeat much more often. But I think we're actually hoping you don't do that. So we thank Professor Juan Campo for, he's going to get us through the slides, okay?
أغدا ألقاك يا خوف فؤادي من غد أغدا ألقاك يا خوف فؤادي من غد أنا شوقي واحتراقي في انتظاري موعدي أغدا ألقاك يا خوف فؤادي من غد أغدا ألقاك يا خوف فؤادي من غد هذا شوقي واحتراقي بانتظاري موعدي كم أخشى غدي هذا وأرجوه اقترابا كم أخشى غدي هذا وأرجوه اقترابا كم أخشى غدي هذا وأرجوه اقترابا كنت أستنيه لكن حبته لما أبى كم أخشى غدي هذا وأرجوه اقترابا كم أخشى غدي هذا وأرجوه اقترابا روحي وأنت لا وشكوني جنوني أنت يا قبلة روحي وإلهي وشكوني أغدا أشرك ودعوك في ليل عيوني أحي من فرحة أحلامي ومن خوف ظنوني أحمل قلب العدي يسمو إليك فغدا تملك بين يديك فارحم القلب الذي يسمو إليك فغدا تملك بين يديك
Stephen Thompson. We'd like to go around and thank our string sections here, our guitarists, our oud people, our canoe people, our cello, our violin, our very happening nigh section, our very happening accordion section, percussion. So we have these drums here called tabla. We have rik, the tambourine. We have frame drums, percussion. And once again, we have Stephen Thompson. So we are a class. We are a class in the music department. We meet on Tuesdays. We'd love to have you join us. And we're going to have our end of the quarter concert in 10 days. In 10 days, this is the 20th of November, Saturday. And we're going to have a short version of this. We're going to make it like a 20-minute version. Then we're going to have Armenian music. We're going to have Greek, Turkish music and different Arab music. We're going to have dance. Our dance companies will be with us. So we're going to have a very much extended program, much beyond a single song. And we have flyers for that. If you go out this door, there's a table. There are flyers, 8.5 by 11. We thank you so very much. We thank the Multicultural Center. We thank Jesse. And we thank Sean. And we thank our sound system. We thank our sound. Thank you very, very, very much. We thank you all. Thank you so much for coming. There's a reception, and we have a surprise in the reception. We're going to have a dancer.